What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Odd Shopper channel. Today, we're talking the Sweet 16 Friday games. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We're also sponsored by Bet365, who has a limited time offer for those of you in Kentucky, Ohio, New Jersey, Virginia, Iowa, Colorado, Louisiana, Indiana, Arizona, and North Carolina. If you're in those states, you have some free money coming your way. What you'll do is click the link in the video description below. Make your first deposit of at least $10, then make a $5 wager on any team, total market, whatever you want. If that bet wins or loses, you get $150 in the form of bonus bets. You must be 21 or older to play, 18 in Kentucky. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, so we've got the second round of the Sweet 16, a lot of really interesting matchups. We're recording these in advance, so we will talk the current lines. First up, we have NC State taking on Marquette. Fun game. NC State probably, I would argue, the lone team that shouldn't be in this portion of the March Madness, I guess. They upset a Texas Tech team that wasn't fully healthy. No Warren Washington. He played in a limited capacity and didn't play his full role in that game. Then they played Oakland. Thanks, Kentucky, for giving us this matchup in the Sweet 16. But if you're a Marquette fan, you should be elated as I am. They're one of the bigger favorites outside of UConn and Purdue in this portion of the tournament. 6-point favorites is a number you can still find with this team. NC State, they're just deficient everywhere against Marquette for the most part. Offense, they're 39th, Marquette 17th. Defense, NC State is 92nd, Marquette is 18th. Rebounding is 204 to 288, and I kind of think this is more just a choice by Marquette than anything else. They have pretty drastic height advantages in this game. They're 25th in effective height. NC State is 105th. And you're going to hear a lot of people talk this week about DJ Burns. I mean, there's not much to say, really. He's had a great tournament, and he's had a horrible regular season. He's only really ranked nationally in block rate and assist rate, which is good. But, I mean, he's not an effective scorer. He's enormous for being 6'9". He weighs 275. Oso is a completely different big man than DJ Burns. Expect Oso to bring DJ Burns away from the basket and then just cook this guy in space, as we've seen DJ Burns get cooked routinely, not just at NC State, but before he made the jump to the Power 6 level when the guy was at Winthrop. I have no faith whatsoever in this big for NC State. Honestly, wish they would just play Ben Middlebrooks, who might actually have a pulse down there, or just rely on Mohamed Diarra, who is someone that Missouri could probably use at this point. But anyway, NC State, they have weaknesses inside. And aside from just my personal bias, this team is 129th at interior defense. Marquette is 12th at interior scoring. So if you don't believe me and you don't believe my personal bias that DJ Burns stinks, here's the data. 129th at interior defense. Not to mention they're 220th defending the three. What does Marquette do well? They shoot the three extremely well. 58th in three-point percentage, 90th in three-point rate. There was a portion of the year where this team was outside the top 203, and they've regressed positively, drastically so. Tyler Kolek shooting 40% from three. Cam Jones just shy of 42%. David Joplin at 37%. Then you get good three-point shooters off your bench. Chase Ross is at 37%. Ben Gold is actually at 36% from three. If you've been as frustrated by me with Ben Gold at times, he's still shooting the ball 36% from three. Wild. But they have shooters from this portion of the court too. So even if you think DJ Burns is awesome and he's played really well in this tournament inside, this team is still a severe liability defending the three. The reason they actually have decent defensive numbers, and let's use decent with a grain of salt here, they force some turnovers. They're 132nd there. Marquette never turns the ball over. They're 28th in turnovers committed, but they're 20th in turnovers forced. NC State, that's not really a problem for them. But against Marquette, generally these problems show up more than against any other team. Maybe Houston or, I don't know, an Iowa State force more turnovers than Marquette. But they're one of these teams with their pressing style on defense that are very, very tricky to play. Last thing, Marquette just 15th in effective field goal. NC State 159th. They're right around half in the country, maybe a little better than that. This team can't score. Marquette's awesome on defense. And really their only defensive weakness, I think, is defending the three. Who are your shooters on NC State that really exploit this? I think you have one good three-point shooter in DJ Horn. He's at 40%. Who else? Jaden Taylor, he's at 36. That's okay. Michael O'Connell at 36. That's okay. You just don't have the depth of shooters that a lot of other teams, including Marquette, do. I'm willing to lay the 6. NC State is the worst team still in the tournament, and they shouldn't even be in the tournament, let alone the Sweet 16. So just an incredible run, capped off by Kentucky's failure to beat an Oakland team. Next up, we go to Gonzaga versus Purdue. Awesome matchup. One of the ones I'm most excited to see, and I think one of the biggest questions is, what has Gonzaga done to make us think they can test Purdue? They have 2 tournament wins. They're against the McNeese State team that had 1 win over top 100 competition, and their best player was a failure at TCU. Pretty predictable outcome. And then they beat Kansas, who was at far less than full strength. So yeah, they played well. Their other good wins are basically against St. Mary's. They had a win over Kentucky in a weird non-con game in the middle of the season. But otherwise, some of their wins have not aged that well. Syracuse, UCLA, USC, to name a few. And then their losses, some of them closer than others. This team played UConn, kind of got slaughtered. Played Purdue, lost by 10 early this year. So that was on November 20th. So a lot has changed since then. But lost to St. Mary's, lost to Santa Clara, San Diego State. Some questionable games from Gonzaga. Purdue doesn't really have a lot of those. When you look at the Purdue schedule, they played close a couple times to Northwestern. Those were some way crazy outlier performances, just shooting-wise, from 3 against this team. And they have a few other blips on the radar. The loss to Ohio State, Wisconsin, the Big 10 tournament. And again, that Northwestern in OT very early in the year. So stylistically in this game, if you were to build a team that might be able to stack up against Purdue, Gonzaga sort of fits the mold. They're 51th at effective height. Purdue is first. They play a tall lineup, and they kind of play 3 bigs, which is interesting against Purdue. On the defensive end, they aren't 10th in the country at stopping opposing teams on the interior, but you're facing Zach Edey, the man no one knows how to officiate. And even if you can stop him, given the bodies that Gonzaga can throw at you, Purdue is number 1 in the country at 3-point percentage. This is ebbed and flowed from throughout the tournament. Kentucky was number 1 at one point till their loss to Oakland. So Purdue jumped them to get the number 1 spot. But all this to say, Purdue has shooters. If you dedicate extra resources to Edey, you can just flat out shoot over the top with Braden Smith and Lance Jones and Fletcher Lawyer. Individually, these are some of the better shooters in the country. Braden Smith's at 44%. Fletcher Lawyer's at 45%. Lance Jones is at 36%. Even some of your bench guys like Miles Colvin's at 44% on 54 attempts. Mason Gillis is at 48% on 113 attempts. Even your bench guys, just absolute flamethrowers from 3 this year. So there's plenty of ways for Purdue to beat you. And unfortunately for Gonzaga, this team is 165th at defending the perimeter. Everything they do well inside, Purdue has shown the ability to beat you in other ways that don't involve Zach Edey. Having him is a huge bonus, the best player in the country. And, I mean, for as big and good as he is, he's never in foul trouble. All this is awesome. Just don't really see any way Purdue lets Gonzaga hang with them for the most part. So this is one I laid a 4.5. Very comfortable with this number at 5. It's available, and it's available on Caesars. That's via Odd Shopper. More on that in just a second. But yeah, you can find -5s out there for Purdue. I grabbed a 4.5 when this opened earlier this week. Third game on deck. Fun one here, man. Really fun. Duke takes on Houston. This is a game where we have Houston sort of limping their way here via injuries, but they've still found ways to get it done. That overtime game against Texas A&M was awesome. Duke had a favor done to them by Wisconsin failing to beat James Madison. So Duke has been in 2 straight blowouts in the NCAA tournament after they lost in the ACC tournament to our very own NC State. So fun matchup here. One I think that's getting exceedingly difficult to predict because of the health status for Houston. Duke overall is an awesome team on the efficiency side. 8th on offense, 23rd on defense, 25th in rebounding. Houston, they're right there, 13th on offense, 1st on defense, 56th in rebounding. The advantages for Duke, height is going to be a massive one. They're 10th in effective height. Houston's 345th. I don't even think they'd be this high if you factored in the injuries. They lost Tugler, who's their rotational big man, which is a huge problem for them at this time of year because Houston's also dealing with an injury to Juwan Roberts, who looks, I mean, the guy is as tough as they come out there, but he's not healthy. You could see him having to be comforted by Sampson, their head coach, in their most recent game. Not playing full minutes, but doing his very best to do so. Like at this point, I'm kind of worried about him just coming out of a game if it gets to be too bad. I don't know. And Javier Francis, he's an awesome rotational big man, kind of in his role. He starts for this team, but generally speaking, when everything's clicking for Houston, he's getting 25 minutes, not 35. And both these players have really bad foul problems, especially Francis. He averages 5.4 fouls per 40 minutes. On average, he's fouling out. That's a huge problem against Duke and Filipkowski and Mitchell on the inside, who play a really tall lineup. They don't force a ton of fouls overall, but man, Houston's 330th in fouls committed. And with their lack of depth, you just don't have players to lose against a Duke team that plays with a ton of height. Not to mention, this Houston team can't shoot. So I think this is a problem for them at some point in the tournament. I love the Houston team overall, but when you are 183rd in effective field goal percentage, at some point you see your runs end. And that's the case with Houston every single time we've seen them in this position. Duke does have some defensive weaknesses, primarily inside, which is insane considering how tall they are, but that's also not really where Houston scores. Houston's worse in 2-point percentage than 3. Duke's better on defense via their guards from 3, so that's a huge problem. And Duke's also an awesome shooting team. It's not just Filipkowski. This team is 11th in the country at 3-point percentage. You have shooters across the board for this team, and they've been better of late. Filipkowski's at 35%, but it only gets better from there. Jeremy Roach at 44, Jared McCain at 42, Caleb Foster, was at 40%, so excuse me mentioning his name, but Tyrese Proctor's at 37%. You have a lot of great players for this team that shoot threes, and it's not just Caleb Foster who's been hurt. I mean, outside of that injury, 44% from Roach, 42 from McCain, and 37 from Tyrese Proctor. So shooters at every single guard position for this team. That's going to be tough for Houston to defend, even with the strength of their defense coming from that area of the floor. It's a lot of points here at 4.5, which is available. I'll bring you to Odd Shopper right now and talk about that for a second. Houston is going to play slow and muck things up, so I think you want every point you possibly can. Pulling up the odd screen right now, you can see a stale 4.5 hung on the board. Right now, it's at FanDuel. It's juiced a little bit, but you can see this has moved to 3.5 in some other spots. Right now, getting Duke at the 4.5 number is awesome, I think, just given the efficiency profile and the strengths they do have. This is the live odds screen at Odd Shopper. I'll tell you a little bit about some of the tools we have. There's so much available to you. We have a market-based approach, which basically scans all these sports books. We look at the most efficient ones, identify places for you to bet and best place to get your money down. But there's a ton of new tools. We have arbitrage tools, parlay calculators. You can now even use our odds boost calculator. A lot of times these books are offering specific odd boosts to you, and that allows you to check and see, is it worth it? How good is it actually? And this is all included in our package along with the Discord. Now I'm in there, Ben's in there. We all talk about these tools and the bets we're making. It's available for $14.95 for your first week, $49.95 for your first month. No long-term commitments, so try it out. I don't think you'll be disappointed. And baseball starting too, if you're interested in that. NBA, NHL, baseball, it's all happening, as well as college hoops. All right, we'll bring you back to our main screen, and we'll talk about our last game in just a second here. But if you couldn't tell, very okay with the Duke side of things for this particular game. All right, last up, my favorite game of the whole Sweet 16, holy smokes. Creighton takes on Tennessee. This game is going to be awesome. Two teams that are awesome on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. Both teams have their strengths, though. Tennessee's a little weaker on offense, 35th to Creighton's 11th. Creighton's a little weaker on defense, 29th to 3rd. Both teams have good height. This is more so a Creighton strength, not Clemson. We talked about them yesterday. Creighton's 5th in effective height. Tennessee's 142, but both teams are pretty good on the interior. As far as rebounding, it's a slight edge to Creighton. That comes mainly on the defensive end. This team doesn't focus on offensive rebounds. Tennessee has to do that more because they're not a great shooting team. More on that in a second. But there's a lot of little micro edges Creighton's way. The only problem I have is just depth. Tennessee does play with a deeper roster. Creighton's never in foul trouble. They're actually number 1 in the country at fouls committed. Being number 1 is good. They never commit fouls, even with their big Kalkbrenner, who's been awesome on the interior. He's only at 2.2 fouls committed per 40 minutes. One of the best foul rates for big men in the entire country. So on the offensive end and how Creighton matches up against Tennessee, they're 3rd in effective field goal percentage. Tennessee is 44th in effective field goal percentage, so just a wide shooting gap. This is how you see Creighton upset teams like UConn throughout the year. Creighton's 3rd in the country at interior scoring, and they're 32nd in three-point percentage. Kalkbrenner, he's amazing, especially on the defensive end, but a very good interior presence. One of the best 2-point percentages in the entire country. He ranks 10th nationally in that. Then you have Shireman shooting 38% from 3. Trey Alexander is actually at 34%, but you've seen awesome improvement from players like Stephen Ashworth, and you have good bench minutes. Mason Miller's at 45% from 3, and that's on 107 attempts. Farabello's at 43%. So you have pretty good rotational guys when they need to come on the floor for Creighton as well. On defense, the main goal is stopping Dalton Connect, who's awesome, and that's way easier said than done. Very few teams have been able to do it, but stopping him scoring the ball does a lot for you. He's at 39% from 3. Your next best shooter is Zakai Ziegler at 35%. No one else even gets close to touching those numbers. That's a main rotational guy. Mashak's at 39%, but only on 36 attempts. So you can stop Connect. You can do a lot of things for this team. Creighton, I think, has the bodies to do it. They're 18th in interior defense and 52nd stopping the 3. Again, Tennessee as a team is 178th shooting the 3. It's basically stop Connect, you stop the 3 for this team. We'll see how Creighton is at doing that. But from there on the Tennessee side, I'm not sure what this team is doing with their rotation. Ziegler's way undersized at the point guard, even with Ashworth on the other side. And then you have Josiah Jordan-James playing a somewhat reduced role. Same thing with Santiago Vescovi. That's evidenced in some of their numbers. Vescovi's 3-point percentage has dropped to 33%, which is pretty bad for him as a player. And otherwise, I mean, no real foul issues with Creighton on the defensive end. Tennessee will get in foul trouble at times. Turnovers forced. Tennessee does force a good amount, but Creighton almost never turns it over, so that's not an edge Tennessee's direction. I think you actually are getting a value with Creighton in the points here, even if it's 2.5. I grabbed a 3 earlier this week, but I'm worried about Tennessee scoring, and I'm worried about them scoring for 6 straight games. This is by far the best team they've faced this tournament, and Creighton will play slow, 227 the pace. Value the point here does make some sense too. That'll do it for us today. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any comments, please leave them below. That helps us a ton. And if you have any questions, reach out to me on Twitter at @_Gajewski. We'll be back this weekend talking Elite 8. But until then, good luck. We'll see you guys later.